Well, if you're here to hear about GE Appliances' rapid upgrade of their digital supply chain capabilities, you've come to the right place. We are joined here today by Kent Suiters, Executive Director, Lead Enterprise at GE Appliances. GE Appliances, part of their improvement in their capabilities is based upon implementation of Blue Yonder applications. So we are also joined by Hong-Mo Yang, Senior Vice President and Managing Director of the Global Manufacturing Sector at Blue Yonder. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I think the easy place to begin, Kent, is just, can you tell us a little bit about who GE Appliances is and a little bit about your supply chain?
Certainly. Thank you, Steve. GE Appliances has been in the business of producing and selling home appliances now for more than 100 years. We are a network of 30 US-based manufacturing plants, distribution centers, and delivery sites. Our business model, if you think about it, is we want to be zero distance to our customer, meaning that we want to produce and develop our products as close to them as possible here in the US. So we've really put a lot of effort to that in the last 10 years. We've spent about $3 billion reshoring and upgrading our manufacturing capability, including our digital strategy, which is involved in Blue Yonder. We've also been very intent on buying locally. We've purchased about $3 billion from local suppliers, about 3,200 in total across the US. So the implementation of a tool like the Blue Yonder Control Tower, Luminant Control Tower, is very important to our connection of our entire supply chain in order to make us what I said, which is being zero distance to our customer and achieve that goal.
Beautiful. And Hong-Mo, I want to ask the same question of you. Can you tell me a little bit about Blue Yonder?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. Blue Yonder is the largest independent software provider focused only on supply chain. We have been around for over 25 years. You might know formally, we were known as JDA, and we did a rebranding as of last year to Blue Yonder. Along the way, a lot of the capabilities that we have include capabilities from companies that we have acquired, including i2 and Manugistics and Red Prairie. And more recently, within the past couple of years, we've purchased a company out of Germany called Blue Yonder that was focused strictly on AI ML. And then just this past summer, we ended up acquiring a company that is focused on e-commerce fulfillment. So it's strictly focused on supply chain. We are a leader in 4 of the Gartner's Magic Quadrants, focused on supply chain planning, S&OP, warehouse management, and transportation management. And as well, I would just also kind of summarize what we've been going through for the past 4 or 5 years, really pivoting to SaaS and the cloud, where we're taking all of our capabilities, all of our products are now available on the cloud. And we've also done a lot of development and investment into SaaS native applications, such as the Luminant Control Tower that Kent and GE Appliances has implemented at GE Appliances.
So Ken, I want to circle back to you. You were talking about your control tower journey. Mm-hmm. My sense is we've been using this term control tower for some years now, but we really are at a place where we're at a next generation of control towers that are so much better than what they were just even a few years ago. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your journey, when it started, and why you started this supply chain control tower journey.
Yes, certainly, I'd be happy to. So like I mentioned earlier, being zero distance to our customer is our business model, and really we can't see a way to accomplish that objective without the visibility that you can achieve from a control tower type tool. But that journey really started back in 2015. We had a fire in a parts storage warehouse where we lost several weeks worth of raw material, and really at that point we realized how important it was to have the visibility into our supply chain. It took us a week to get through really Herculean effort by the team to get our supply chain stood back up and running again after that fire. And without that visibility, it was just a very difficult task. So because of that, we really made that digitization of our supply chain a top priority. The piece of it that's really important about that is to be able to connect our planning layers, particularly our operational planning layers and our execution layers together without spreadsheets, be able to, so we can see problems before they occur and be able to correct them before we've disappointed our customers or incurred incredible costs to supply what our customers were asking for. So Blue Yonder's control tower, illuminated control tower, really provides the workflows, the types of visibilities that we think and believe we need to create that visibility and to enable us to respond to those exceptions in our process.
Beautiful. And Hung Mo, do you agree with the premise that we've got a new generation of supply chain control towers? And if so, how are they different from that older generation of control towers?
So if you kind of think about different layers, you think about kind of the time horizon, there are some capabilities and processes that are at the strategic layer. There's some that are at tactical layer. There's the operational layer, and then there's the execution layer. And as you think about that kind of time horizon, where more of our customers that are really kind of leading in their industries are going is to really think about how do you do a closed loop between planning and execution. It's no longer about let's go ahead and do a plan, open-ended, throw it out there and see what happens. It's really take that plan, how's the execution against that, and then being able to make adjustments so that you're able to deliver and meet and exceed that plan that you have. And in order for you to be able to do that, you have to close that loop between execution and planning. And that's, really a pretty critical capability that people are starting to see. There's a lot of companies that have done a lot of the sales and operations planning, but now they're needing to go down to the next level and see where the execution meets the plan.
Right. Hung Mo, I'm beginning to hear the term in the industry, sales and operations execution. And when I think of a control tower, I really, it's a good point. We have to close the loop. All of these things need to work together. But I really think of a control tower more at that execution layer. I just, any comments? I'm not trying to.
No, I think that's a fair comment, because people are really looking to drive and derive the benefit of having visibility. But you also have to kind of think about where is this going and how is this going to help you? And it's not only about having that visibility, but also understanding, okay, so how do you actually take this and orchestrate the next supply decisions that you're going to make? And a lot of the capabilities that we're adding to, products like Illumina Control Tower is the ability to predict. And, we have this notion of you want to be able to predict, not only see what's going on, but to be able to predict what's going to happen in terms of disruptions, and then come up with what are the options that I need to think about, and how do they impact our revenue growth, cost to serve, cash to serve, customer service level. All of those things are going to be very important.
So, Kent, maybe we could dig a little bit deeper into just what kind of information you're capturing in your control tower and how you're using it.
Yeah, certainly, Steve. So we really we're looking for two things. One is we want to see real time the orders that our customers are giving us. We see them with some level of lead time. We want to connect that to where our supply is at in the system, where our product is relative to those orders, where there are holes in that supply or places where we need to redeploy product or produce something that maybe wasn't necessarily in our plan. But so we're capturing what our factories are doing. We're capturing what our orders are. But we're also pulling in now the location of where shipments are, for example, in the network between our plants and our distribution centers by integrating with trucking firms, and where their trucks are, their trailers, things of that nature. Really trying to connect all that together and see. Ultimately, in the plan, we want to take that even beyond that piece of our supply chain and go much deeper to our component supply, raw material supplies, any source finished goods that we might have, in order to be able to just get a full picture of our end-to-end supply chain.
So something bad happens, Kent.
Yes.
And you want to fix it. Are you optimizing to fix it, or are you just sort of rules-based decisions? When A happens, do B.
So I think there's a kind of a combination of two things that may be going on depending on the severity of the issue. We haven't gotten there yet. Part of our roadmap is to get to the point where we would take those exceptions and monitor through artificial intelligence or machine learning, as you might think about it that way, how we solve those problems so that eventually those exceptions may be handled within the control tower itself. That would be more of just the process with some exceptions or plans, or rules plans of how we would adjust those. If there was a significant change in demand, a significant change in supply, that would require us really maybe to go back and do some replanning. That would be also a solution, would be something that would be done with people, probably more so maybe than the control tower at this point.
Right. And one of the things in the industry, and this is kind of a delicate question, but when you hear, when I have heard other people talk about their control tower journey, I always expected that what I would hear is, we were dealing with vendor A and we used all of their applications and all their technology, and we built it just using them. And that's not what I'm hearing. More often when I'm hearing the control tower journey, I'm hearing about taking supply chain applications and putting them on top of a data lake that a company has built for itself. Mm-hmm. Which way are you going on this?
So we're actually building our own data lake. That's something we decided to do. It's funny. We were in one of our digital strategy meetings one day. We were talking about this very subject, and one of the team members said, it's really hard to fish if you don't have a lake, right? And so we all kind of laughed about it for a while, and then we really realized just how smart that was. And so we decided to go down the path of building a data lake, or an enterprise data warehouse, if you will, and having that single source of truth, that single place where common definitions of the data exist. And so we've started building that out. We like the fact that we control it, and we're doing it ourselves because we've created our own subject matter experts, if you will, around the data. We have common definitions, and now all the functions are tied together to one single source of truth, I guess you could call it that, through that data warehouse. The other thing I would say, operationally, it's an advantage to us because we're not pulling from our production systems during peak demand periods during the day, right? So that data resides, we can access it any time without really affecting the results. So it is, for us, it's the right decision. The other thing I would say, probably even, which is probably maybe the most critical piece, is the ability for data governance to really control that data, its definition, its integrity. That is just fundamental to success in this space.
Right. And Hong Mo, I've been interviewing people that have put in supply chain planning applications of one form or another for many years. Data governance, it just comes up all the time. I imagine you must be hearing that as well. And if you have any thoughts around that, I'd love to hear them.
So, if you think about any implementation, the tallest pole in the tent in terms of being able to get an implementation successful is really how do you actually end up getting the data cleaned and normalized and so on. And being able to, one, have the ability to ingest whatever the data is in whatever the format, and then being able to normalize it, and then being able to serve it up to the various applications where you're going to be consuming that. That really is kind of where we're, leveraging our capability from the Luminate platform to be able to serve up. And the Luminate Control Tower is one of the first application that was built on top of that platform. One of the things that we really kind of encourage is, not only take the data and normalize it, and you'd have to normalize it so that, item definition from one system is, equal to some other product definition from another system. But then also think about how do you normalize it and how do you put it in a format where you can actually learn what's happening. And we have this notion of a playbook. Whenever there's a disruption, you have to kind of think about, okay, how do you detect, how do you know that it's happening? What can you do? What are the actions that you can take in order to respond to it? And to be able to think about, okay, normalize it, and how do you actually get it to a format where you can actually learn from that and then apply, additional things like predictions and, resolutions that you can ultimately, once you feel comfortable with the resolutions, that you can have it automated from an automated path. So being able to normalize, and we do have some capabilities to help with looking at orphan data, and we call it data doctor, data management services, and so on within our platform. It really is looking to address a lot of the concerns related to the data governance and data consistency.
So, Kent, when I've heard people talk about supply chain implementations, data's, they always wish that they had thought ahead and done more around data. And they always wish that they'd spent more time and worked harder around change management. Was that an issue for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's something we've learned. It's something that's very important in our implementation. We've done a lot to improve in that area and continuing to expand governance, even as we think about data that's not yet in the lake, that's not being consumed by the control tower. We're thinking about how we do the proper cleansing, the certifications, et cetera, of that data to make it good from a governance perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Kent, the other thing is you're on a journey toward better control tower capabilities, better service for your customers. Mm-hmm. But COVID came along. So that had to be a hurdle. Can you talk about that and how you dealt with that, and whether you accelerated some parts of this or slowed down because of that?
That's such an interesting question. I really wouldn't say that COVID was a hurdle. What I would really say is it certainly changed our approach and our scope and how we implemented it. And if you think about when COVID came about, as a business, we really changed our focus and really kind of got into three things, right? One was protecting our employees, two was serving our customers, and three was supporting our communities, right? That where we exist. And we spent a lot of time making sure that our employees were safe by we do a work from home policy, right? And we shut down our factories, went through a whole extensive effort to make them safe for people to come to work. But the majority of the folks, well, all the people who work on this particular project are all part of that work from home situation. So we went from being a traditional implementation where, you're face to face, you're doing the design and implementation of a system like this on site, to one where it's all being done virtually. So now the Blue Yonder team, my GE Appliances team, had to work very hard to stay well connected because of that situation, right? So the other thing I would say is as we saw COVID develop, it really changed the dynamics of our market and the way our customers bought, and so we became very focused on on demand and what was happening with demand at the time. Not that we weren't before, it just now had different implications because of the way it was changing so quickly. So what that did is we were going through and implementing the control tower, is it forced us to really size down the implementations that we did. So we, instead of having, larger ones, we went to much smaller, more focused implementations so that we were tying directly together demand and supply for our end users and making sure that we answered the questions and gained the insights that we needed because of the ever-changing, rapidly changing environment that COVID had created. So I really think the best part about that is that we were able to really learn a lot quickly in our implementation. It forced us to make some adjustments in what we were doing because the tools we needed didn't necessarily change, the timing of them did. So I would say it really wasn't a hurdle. I think it just changed the way we approached it and made it more flexible, more adaptable during the course of our implementation that we've done so far to date.
Great. And when I think of that, so you sort of were tacking and changing and sort of the projects that were involved in this became smaller and they became more focused. I think one of the terms we're hearing is you're putting control towers in to be more agile, but kind of what you're describing is an agile approach to implementation. Hong Mo, is that something Blue Yonder tries to do? First of all, probably if there's some folks that don't know what it is, if you could define what an agile implementation is and sort of talk about Blue Yonder's approach to it.
Yeah, so if you think about agile from a pure business perspective, it's really trying to figure out, okay, what are some quick wins that you can get that will actually get the wheel turning, and then you want to take on more. So what are the quick wins? Generate results. Use the results to be able to take at least some portion of that result back into improving that even further. Get more results and so on and so forth. A lot of our I applaud Kent and GE Appliances in terms of being able to take things and working on specific use cases, delivering on that value so that people want to, get even more from, okay, so you've gotten one level, now I'd like to understand a little bit more. And it's a pull-based way of implementing as opposed to, let me go ahead and, anticipate all the things that you're going to want and then, do a big bang and try to roll it out and get people to adopt it. And I think the way that GE Appliances team and Kent have approached it is clearly the best practice. And in fact, I would also make one other observation, that is the leading companies, they are kind of going at this operating model of let me go and generate some quick wins and results, use a portion of that to fund additional innovation and improvements, and trying to get more of the, whether it's cash flow generation or structural cost savings, and then continuing to do even more as opposed to saying, okay, we're just going to invest upfront and hope that we get some return back.
Yeah. So Kent, Hong Mo is talking about some potential benefits from these kinds of implementations. Is it too early to talk about benefits for GE Appliances around this project?
No, not at all. I mean, I think even though we haven't implemented the full scope of where we want to take the control tower at this point, we're starting to see and realize benefits, things that are really changing the way we work in a lot of ways. So, for example, today we have a full view of our finished goods, where it's at relative to customer demand and things of that nature, which was something that was difficult to come by in the past, right? So now we have that ability to be able to see that and find where there's opportunities for improvement or where we have opportunities potentially to disappoint a customer. So that's been helpful and allowed us to resolve those problems early without being an issue. The other thing was we've created some cross-functional, cross-enterprise connections that were just in the past very difficult to create because of the multiple locations of data, because of the differences in definitions. et cetera. So now we have that. We can connect, for example, fulfillment, distribution, the commercial team, and finance are now all looking at the same set of data. There's no credibility issues. It's all one set of visuals that they're working with to answer their questions and solve problems. So that's very good. And the other thing I would say that really probably a benefit that you might not think of, and Hong Mo hit on it, with as you do an agile implementation like we've really done, and we were started on that path, but we really cut it into smaller bite sizes than where we started. We've learned a lot about our system. We've learned about where functionality wasn't necessarily in the plan or at the time in the plan. We brought it in, right? So it allowed us to really make our control tower much more a solution, a better solution, more efficient solution for our supply chain, the visibility we're trying to create. So I'm very pleased with, in the 9 short months we've been working on this, the accomplishments that we've created and the benefits we're seeing and feeling from it.
Quantitatively, it's probably, we would expect better service levels with less inventory based on this.
Yeah.
But you were doing this during COVID, so you don't have a good baseline, right? Is that something you can talk about or not?
Well, I mean, it's like I said before, it's changed the way we work. COVID has. I mean, our demands are up, high double digits, 30, 40%. So inventory is not something we have a luxury of having a lot of right now, right? So I would say until our process and our supply chains kind of stabilize out from the impact of that, it's really tough to say what the exact impacts are. But what I can tell you is that we can more efficiently see where our inventory needs to be today than we ever could and where it's at. So it helps us now do a much better job of pulling and flowing. If you think about lean manufacturing and lean principles, there's nothing but benefit associated with that in the long run.
Right. And you describe sort of common data, you can now create metrics that people agree to.
Yes.
Your title is, lean enterprise.
Yes.
It sounds like what you've built is a platform for ongoing continuous improvement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. My team, if you think about what my lean enterprise team does, we're essentially a center of excellence or a think tank that's focused on business process transformation, right? Building out tools like a control tower, and then building upon that into the next layers up in our planning processes is only going to be it's only going to help us drive those business process transformations that we want to. Building on lean principles, thinking about how do you make us more efficient, and that's the key here, I think.
Right.
If I can just kind of add to that, a lot of people think about control tower implementation and look to the visibility as being one of the key benefits. And I think that's absolutely right. But the other thing that, you have to kind of think about is, just like what Ken said, it's no longer just about visibility at a function or a silo. It's really, how do you look at this in its entirety and synchronize and orchestrate? Because now you have the visibility from, your supply all the way to your points of demand and decisions that are being made. And so, we think Ken kind of hit upon, it's not just about, a function, but you got finance, you got supply, you got inventory, warehouses, all of those kind of looking at the same picture, and then looking at how do we orchestrate. So it's no longer just visibility, but going to the next level, how do we respond to certain exceptions and so on that happen. So, I think that's as you continue to get comfortable and continue to push the process, the tool will be able to support that kind of process improvement.
Earlier, and I didn't push on this because there was material I wanted to cover, but you used the term playbook, and now we're talking about responsiveness. This might be a good place for you to sort of describe what a playbook is and how it helps a company be responsive.
Yeah, so the way we think about playbooks is in being able to know when something happens, when an exception arises. One, how do you know that this is a problem, and how do you actually know what impact that's going to have on, maybe it's a downstream or maybe it's a future supply decisions that you have to make, and that will require a collaboration with whoever I am having that visibility. It'll require collaboration with somebody else. If I'm a demand person, but I need to understand, okay, if I ended up making a change in demand, what capability do we have to increase the supply? And so there's collaboration that needs to happen. The way we think about playbooks is in being able to know under certain situations, if there's a demand increase of 30%, then I typically work with another planner, supply planner, to understand, okay, what is the impact if I were to increase this? Would you be able to increase the supply and figure out what are the different options and scenarios that could potentially get me to meeting the 30% demand? But that has to be in light of, not only are you able to meet the revenue, but you have to understand what's the cost to serve, what's the cash to serve, and then impact as related to, the customer service level as measured by the customer. And what we say in our playbook, and you almost have to think about how do you orchestrate responses to things. And you can actually take the responses by different personas and maybe the different scenarios that you might want to run, and start kind of capturing that as a, kind of a playbook. And then you can, when some event similar to what you've kind of created happens, you can actually just say, let's run the play and run that playbook, and, have the ability in our planning tools, for example, to be able to run the scenarios, get the right personas to understand, okay, we're going to run these plays. I know, what the demand changes are because I have the ability to link the scenarios and then be able to come very quickly across various, functions to be able to see the impact on, the revenue, cost to serve, cash to serve, customer service levels.
Right. Kent, maybe you could talk a little bit about where your journey goes from here. You've talked a lot about, control tower, but you probably want to do things with your supply chain that maybe, it's not all about just control tower technology. So what's your vision for going forward here?
Yeah, so certainly we want to finish out the things we haven't done yet to complete the control tower, and then broaden its view of our supply chain by getting out to our supply base and whatnot. So that's on the roadmap. But really the most important next step for us is to really move up in those planning layers, right? If you think about the next layer up is kind of an optimization layer or sales and operations planning. So, there's some pieces there we need to build out, demand sensing, demand planning types of things, scenario planning, those types of tools to allow us to really start to optimize what our supply chain is going to do, the signal that then feeds into that execution or that operational planning and execution layer. So that's our next focus. Obviously, as we go forward, we want we'll be moving into more of an integrated business planning process, as well as you think about connecting customers, the product, and our supply all together into an agile and resilient supply chain. If you think about that, and COVID and what's happened there has really just emphasized how important having that capability is, that ability to really connect the dots, see around the corners, and both in your planning from a capacity perspective and a supply perspective, as well as your execution ability. So that's really getting into that demand layer, and that S&OP layer is our next step, I guess.
Yeah, and you talk about, and this is just my 2 cents. You talk about climbing up the planning hierarchy, more optimization. the vocabulary I use is, orchestration is where you sort of say, you have a rules-based way of saying, we've got a problem. When this problem happens, when A happens, do B.
Yep.
But in my mind, optimization trumps orchestration every time. Optimization understands how to maximize your revenues or minimize your costs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just my little soapbox.
Yep.
So Hong Mo, what about, where does Blue Yonder want to go as a company? How do you want to improve your ability to provide better solutions for your customers?
I think there's multiple ways, but fundamentally, at the core of what we're trying to do is to help companies and teams that, such as the one that Kent is leading, to achieve business impact. And again, it comes back to revenue growth, cost to serve, cash to serve, and customer service levels. What we're trying to do is, okay, with our tools, with our products, how do we, facilitate and help so that when you make a decision in terms of supply, you may end up having multiple scenarios, but you also understand the trade-offs between, some of the, you may be able to meet the revenue, but cost to serve, that revenue uplift may not be something that you're willing to live with. So are there other scenarios that still maybe not 100% meet the revenue gap or revenue lift that you're looking for, but is able to deliver that with reasonable cost to serve, reasonable cash to serve, and acceptable customer service level. We want to be able to help you make those decisions, and we want to be able to help you make those decisions with optimization, or in the case where optimization is not needed, but you end up doing something that you need to respond to very quickly. There may be much more of a heuristic solver that you want to use, or there may be a possibility of using AI/ML based on all the historical actions and the way that you have resolved different exceptions that have arisen. We want to be able to provide you with capabilities to use all of that where it's needed, where it's appropriate, because in our minds, it's possible that in, for example, manufacturing, you may want to do a optimization run, and you may only do that, once a week or whatever. But maybe in the distribution where you're needing to decide and respond, within an hour, you may have to think about, okay, how do I do a more of a heuristic run? We allow you to be able to run different solvers for different parts of your network at different cadence, different frequency, and so on. So all of that is possible. The other thing that I would say is it's important, we kind of talked about closing the loop between execution and planning. It's almost like, I spent some time at a management consulting firm, but one of the things that we always kind of debated was execution could be the strategy. And so being able to know what's happening and then being able to, think about, okay, how do you actually respond to that? So we have this notion of being able to do planning, for example, on a cadence level, whether it's weekly or daily or monthly or whatever. But then we also have the ability to take a lot of the feedback, real-time feedback that you're getting in, for example, the control tower with disruptions and events that are happening, and then feed it and link it such that you can actually have an always-on planning that responds to any of the exceptions to plan. So, it's really thinking about what are the things that are driving the business results, and then what are the appropriate capabilities that we can bring to bear for different parts of your supply network to be able to give you visibility, number one, but then what are the options? How do we, think about, responding to that in an optimal way?
Right. Well, gentlemen, we're almost out of time here, but we've had an interesting discussion. I just want to ask an open-ended question. Do you have any final thoughts? Is there anything we've had in this conversation that sort of makes you say, gee, I wish I had talked a little bit more about this?
So there's one thing in particular, Steve, I'd like to just point out, right? I mean, this is, you said it early on, there are a lot of different technologies out there, a lot of different providers. And I think taking time, and I always like to tell my team, you got to go slow to go fast, because you got to really understand what you're trying to accomplish. So we spent a lot of time investigating and understanding providers and what they could do for us. Hong Mo mentioned Gartner. We actively engaged Gartner in this process to really learn about the providers and what they were able to do. And what it allowed us to do is really narrow in on the ones that we should consider. We spent a lot of time doing proof of concepts with them, and honestly, that's where Blue Yonder really shined for us, right? Their proof of concept was very good, and then they brought some other things to the table that I felt were really important, right? Very clear roadmap, good vision, and a lot of supply chain expertise, which were things that were important to us in the process of implementing this control tower. So I think that's really important to do your homework in this thing, because it's a big investment in time, and it really is something you want to build foundationally, I think, very strongly as part of your digital strategy and roadmap. So that'd be one thing I think it's really important for people to know.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to end. I think that's a great piece of advice. I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you, Steve.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Hong Mo.